Quick correction, it's Yoti, but everyone's got different pronunciations of it. So I'm going to talk to you today about what we're calling Age Connect and our approach to introducing minimum standards to interoperable age token networks. So there's a bit of a background. We've been working with age tokens for about 5 years now. Pretty early on, we identified that one of the challenges of adding age assurance to the digital world, the online space, is that users aren't going to want to have to keep on presenting their face or their documents or entering a phone number or doing other kind of actions to prove their age every time they click on a new link and go to a new website. So we looked at an age token as a way of shortcutting that level of friction. And the whole premise is once you've done an age verification, we record a token, kind of like a payment token, which just kind of signs the transaction, says someone legitimate has performed that transaction, how that's been performed, and what the outcome was. But it doesn't contain any personal information. So the goal is to create an open and interoperable network of age tokens that can be used by age assurance providers, and it can be used by reliant parties, by platforms, to check the ages of people without asking those people to keep on providing full verification each time they arrive at a platform. Over the years, we've seen some common challenges of introducing age assurance. One of the big challenges is trying to figure out what type of age assurance is good. So not all approaches are equal. Even if the methods may be the same, an age estimation performed in one particular scenario may not be as good as an age estimation performed in another scenario. So we all know that if there's no liveness or no anti-injection detection, age estimation can be easily beaten. Same with document verification. If there's no matching of the person's face to the document, it's quite easy to take someone else's document and pass it off as your own and use that for age verification. And one of the challenges we've seen is that when people are starting to add age assurance to their platform, they don't really understand what those differences are or how to check those differences. So we've been working really hard about thinking on how can we shorten that level of education, that level of discovery, down to a point where you can just say, I need age assurance, I'm happy to accept it from a document or from facial age estimation, and I don't really have to dive too deeply into how that's been done. So the idea behind our network is that any assurance, any token that's been brought into that network has always been generated with a common set of standards. So you always know a token from a document has been through liveness, has been through face matching, has been through anti-injection, and same with age estimation, same with any other method that comes into that network. So we want to make it really easy for platforms, for other service providers to trust a historical age verification so it can be reused reliably. We're really focused on minimum standards and auditing. So I think at this conference there's going to be a lot around kind of the certification for age assurance methods. But in the world of performing an age assurance check, it's not just the method that needs to be kind of very good. There's also questions around privacy, around security, around resilience. All of these kind of aspects need to be looked at. So you don't want to be bringing in an age assurance process that may be great at actually doing the check, but then maybe leaking data all over the internet, or perhaps that company's about to go bust, or there's going to be other problems within the operation of that check. So we're really looking at ways of ensuring that there are minimum standards of who comes in and how they're operating, not just as a checker, but as a business overall. The other challenge we've been looking at is what is the cost of participation? So as a service provider, if you're issuing tokens into an age token network, it can cost you money. And that's not necessarily good business, right? That's not necessarily good for the market because it creates an imbalance when you're paying money to put something into a network. And then it means you have to perhaps act in ways that are not always good for the platform to ensure you can recoup that money. So you want to take away that risk and just say, look, if you put a token into the network, you're not going to have to pay for that. The cost comes when that token gets used. And within that cost, then there's space for negotiation. And then crucially, there's no preferred suppliers. So we want it to be an open network. So it's not a case of we decide who is the best supplier. It's down to the platforms and to the service providers to figure out what conditions are they willing to use the token for, and then a token is selected based on those conditions. So it could be based on the price, it could be based on how that token was generated, it could be based on when that token was generated. It could potentially be based on who generated that token, if that particular platform or supplier had their own preferred supplier, but it's not down to the network to select who is the favorited supplier. So just a quick overview of how this all works. So as we have today, a user proves their age. They go through any one of a number of flows. At the end of the journey, they're asked if they want to save that verification. And at that point, an age token is minted, and it's secured with the method used, when it was generated, the cost of reusing that token. And that's set by the company that did the original verification. So they can decide if somebody else wants to use this token, they need to pay X amount. That value could be zero. So they could say, actually, this token is free for everybody to use. Once that's been done, another business, that could be a platform, that could be another verification provider, can then ask for proof that verification has been performed. And at that point, all the user has to do is verify that they own a token. And then the Age Token Network selects the best available token for that platform or service provider. And then, as I said, that's based on the requirements, based on cost, based on methods accepted, based on time. And then finally, if a user can prove that they have a token and there is a token that meets all of the requirements, then access is granted to the user. So from a user's perspective, they've done one verification, they've created a token and they've secured it. And then on further verifications, they're just kind of pressing a button to verify that they still have a token, and all the kind of the magic of the token selection that happens in the background on the network. So as a platform, or potentially a service provider who's trying to reuse tokens, you set your own criteria. You decide if, in a particular scenario, you're happy to accept the token with an age estimation or with a document verification, or perhaps it can be expanded out to include email inference or other methods. You decide how much you're willing to pay for that token. So you can set that price per token, per user, per industry, per country, per time. It's completely up to you to decide how much you want to pay. You can make that flexible, and then you'll be given a token if it's available. One of the, again, key benefits is you don't have to then start trying to integrate with 10 or 15 or a dozen different providers. There's just one token network that you can speak to, and that token network coordinates with all the different providers to figure out where those tokens can come from. Now, as I said, the core principles, we're really looking at making sure that there's no kind of monopoly behavior. So the token selection is really based around an algorithm. So again, as I say, we're looking to make sure that relying parties are given a token that is best fit for their current purpose. And it's not kind of selected based on any other kind of preference. There's no price discrimination. So as an issuer, you're not penalized for putting a token in at a very low price. You're not penalized for putting in a token at a very high price. You understand your own market dynamics. You understand your own commercialization. So that is really, really down to you. The one piece we have looked at is how to ensure that there isn't this, I guess, attempt to undercut each other by creating a race to the bottom or disadvantaging people who can't do things very cheaply because they're going with a very high levels of assurance. So what we do is we go with a second cheapest token approach. So if you put in a token at price A and somebody knows your pricing, they come in with price B, which is slightly lower, price A still wins. It's the oldest token, it's the second cheapest token, and you'll continue to win until that token expires. The fact that it continues to win until the token expires, it's still it's an important point because it then allows new entrants to come in after that token expires and reissue tokens, and they can become kind of the new owner or the new issuer of that token for that user. So it's not a case of one company can come in, generate all the tokens, and then forever on that network belongs to that issuer. There's always a chance for new issuers to come in, for new innovation to kind of advance things along, and it kind of effectively creates a scenario where lockout isn't possible. And just down to the token security, they're built to resist, or I'll use that phrase very carefully because I think it's an underused kind of term. They're built to be resistant to sharing and to tampering. So I think a lot of times people say things are tamper-proof or share-proof, and I think that's a bit misleading because they're resistant to those. So if somebody tampers with the token, we try to make it evident that that token has been manipulated in a way that makes it unreliable. And same if that token has been shared, we try to make it evident that the token has been shared so a platform can understand, okay, well, this token is legitimate, it's been signed, but now it looks like somebody else has used it or somebody else has changed some of the data within that token. Perhaps I shouldn't be trusting this token. The pricing of the network, we want to keep this transparent. So it's not a case of each issuer has secret pricing that they agree with Yoti. That pricing is available to everybody. You put your price on your token, everyone has the same price, and then if you want to do something specific, that takes place outside of the network. So everyone can keep their own relationships. Platforms can negotiate directly with issuers if they wish to do so, but there's a standardization of pricing that people can kind of set on their own. And then finally, the membership and the governance of membership, that can be changed by the members. So it's not a case of the network kind of comes in, we set everything out, and then the network decides at whim prices are going to go up, prices are going to go down. It's really down to the network to make a proposal, and then all the members make a proposal, and the members can vote on whether they agree with that proposal or not. So we really want it to be a collaborative operation rather than an operation that's kind of just driven by one entity that dictates how everything works. And then finally, if you're interested in becoming an issuer, I guess it's just really important to understand that the goal is for a fair and objective algorithm to select tokens. So it's not, as I say, it's not a case of a preferred supplier comes in and takes everything. It's really a case of whichever supplier has the best token for a platform at that point in time, that's the supplier who wins. There is no cost to issue tokens in, and there shouldn't be any future cost of issuing tokens. And as a supplier, you set your own pricing. So if, again, as I say, if you have a price of 1 penny and you want to keep that price, that is down to you. If you want to charge £1, you charge £1. We're not going to penalize anybody for any selection of pricing of any previous agreements they have or any future agreements they want to set in place. Does anybody have any questions?
Commendably on time. Wonderful. Go ahead.
What does a token technically looks like?
So technically, it follows the W3C credential standard. So it's an issuer, it's a signature, timestamp of when it was generated, basically what is it for? So age proofing, the method that was used to generate that token, and the price. That's really it.
Browser-based operating system?
So it's secured with the browser or the device's passkey, but it's not bound to a passkey. So we hold the token in a remote storage, but then we use the device to secure and kind of confirm access to that particular item. So from, I guess, the storage perspective, there's just a pile of stuff, but then the device knows how to reach that stuff. So it's kind of a case of ask the device, tell me where your things are, and we'll find out from your things what's the right thing for you.
Guy at the back there, and then you.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Amari. Sorry if I missed this, but can you state why an age token might expire?
Yeah, so one of the scenarios that we've kind of identified is that in the ideal world, everybody has their own device, and no one shares that with anybody else. But in the real world, especially with kind of parents and children, devices get shared. They get shared between siblings. It's more than conceivable that a parent or an older person may verify their age on a device, secure that device, and then at some point another person understands how to unlock that device and prove kind of ownership of that device. So we believe that expiring those tokens periodically just puts us in a position where every now and then, even if somebody has obtained access to a device that belongs to someone that they know, they're still going to have to re-verify their age at some point.
And what frequency?
With hopefully regulators can give us some
Oh,
guidance on
regular,
that.
okay. So the woman there, yeah.
It was actually the same question about expiration.
I have a question. Have you ever, or has anybody representing the company ever had to go to court to testify that an age verification process had been properly completed? Because your tokens exist and we know how they work and so on, but there could be cases in court where the question of whether or not it had been properly done and authentically done is material to the case. Maybe Robin knows the answer.
We haven't had to go to court to do that, but it wouldn't surprise me at some point if a relying party has issues and that could end up in a court case. And
Yeah.
they would then want us or whoever has done the check for that token to then explain that they're audited, that the sound system, SOC 2s, and all sorts of stuff. The court may decide that's pretty compelling, but you may not always get it perfectly right, but normally your tokens are reliable for a relying party to rely on.
And that in this particular case, the verification process had in fact happened.
Yes.
Yeah. At the back there.
Yeah, sorry, just one more question, Amari. You talk about standards, which I think is, a very good thing, but there's quite a big difference in standard between deriving an age token from an ID verification check versus an age estimation check, which is just an estimation. Can you talk about how that variance in assurance can basically work in an ecosystem?
Yes, I mean, even if you look at kind of today with different rules and different regulations, they generally talk about age assurance. So they'll say actually for age assurance, we'd accept an age estimation or an age verification or an age inference. And what we're trying to do is standardize for each method what's the minimum standard. So if you're doing an age estimation, what's the minimum standard for an age estimation? What's the minimum standard for an age verification from a document? What's the minimum standard for an age verification from a digital ID? And keep it kind of standardized on a per method basis. So when I talk about kind of specific methods, age estimation, document verification, that's because we've really dived into what it requires to make those things good. If issuers have different or unique methods, if they kind of present actually, here's how we make sure that our particular method, our particular approach is good and it's been audited externally, then that's something we're happy to kind of bring in. So actually this becomes a new way that you can use to issue a token.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, can I bring the mic to you for people online?
Yeah.
Hi, Omar. How do you deal with jurisdictions? Because not all jurisdictions treat the tokens equally. So is there like a jurisdiction layer, then you filter out those who are acceptable and those who are not?
So I think this is really down to the kind of the service providers who are consuming tokens and the relying parties who are consuming tokens to decide on. Because ultimately, the liability lies with them, right? So I think it would not be appropriate for the network to decide which jurisdiction a token is appropriate in. Because ultimately, if the network gets it wrong, it's still only the platform that has to answer for it.
I also, because I can imagine a situation in which there's confusion, like a kid has an age verification token, goes on vacation and it doesn't work. So how would you explain that? Because I think it's a user interface thing in the end, but how would you do that?
So I think, as you say, that's kind of that is very much a UX and a messaging piece to explain that, look, you have a token, but the particular tokens you have are not valid in the current scenario that you're in. As kind of, I guess it's probably another talk, but how do you get kind of age assurance to work well for your platform? A lot of that is based around how much upfront messaging you give to your users about why they're doing that verification, what they expect to get from it, and what's going to be allowed for it. And we've always seen that when that education is done upfront, users have higher success rates because they know, okay, I can't use my face in this, and I've got to use a document, or I can't use a credit card in this, and I've got to use something else.
BBC won't let me use my BBC account to watch football when I'm in France. And the BBC knows I'm in France.
I think over time you can see that there will be court cases on things like, if you've done a facial age estimation and you've done a level 2 or level 3 liveness with that, or you've done an ID verification with no liveness, or level 1 liveness, it's going to end up in court with experts from NIST or whoever, subpoenaed to say a level 2 or level 3 facial age estimation where somebody's aged 50 and we think they're over 18 is a higher level of scientific confidence than a non-liveness ID verification. That hasn't gone to court yet, but it's pretty obvious that at some point that will get tested in court by a relying party who thinks the science is good. And why should you fine me just because somebody else chooses an ID verification and I'm using a better piece of science? So that will get tested. And I think eventually more and more regulators will say we've got to probably be more conforming on the science. Otherwise, we're going to keep on ending up in court saying, well, we think ID verification's better or sometimes better. They're going to have to be clearer as to what's the science they're basing that on. Otherwise, they'll end up in court.
Any other chap there? Yeah.
Hi, Murray. Just two questions. One, as a user, can I have multiple tokens with different methods on my device? So one for age estimation, one for ID verification, etc.
Yep, absolutely you can.
All right. And from the business side, right? If I'm a merchant and I want to integrate this age connection, right, that you use doing for tokens, what is the process? What the business have to do? How do they get engaged with this network so that they can start accessing all those tokens that have been issued from different providers?
So you can either integrate directly with Yoti, we'd love that, and then you can just add in the kind of the Age Connect option in your verification requests, or you can speak to any of the other issuers that want to work with us and ask them through the same.
Is that going to be like a standardized payload that you can understand what the Age Connect is sending back to the merchant, so they can understand what's the method being used, what's the timestamps, etc. So because eventually they will have to build their own way to read that information coming back from you, and they have to be standardized from so the standard is coming from the Age Connect network, not from every individual provider. Otherwise, it's going to be very complicated.
Yeah. So if it comes through us, then that response is standardized. If you're working with another verification provider and you've asked them to integrate Age Connect, then kind of your response from them will be standardized, but it'll be standardized to your integration with them. So as a end platform, effectively, you don't really have to make any changes. You just have to kind of say you want to use the Age Connect network.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other? There you are. Chat there. Thank you.
Who gets to vote? Issuers, reliant parties? Is there a minimum token thresholds to get a vote?
It's the issuers, and there's no minimum token threshold. I guess that raises a question that we've been kind of discussing internally around who's issued the most tokens and who's kind of got the most tokens being used, and what additional power does that give them. So what happens when someone's kind of pushing 70% of the tokens through the network? Do they effectively say, if you don't do what I say, we're going to leave the network and kind of ruin things? While that's I guess it's always a possibility, one of the aspects we've been looking at is saying, actually, if you go past a threshold, say past 55 or 60% of kind of network dominance, we start looking at kind of almost like a token tax that then gets redistributed amongst all the other members. So that uplift of network dominance comes at a cost. So that the encouragement isn't to kind of wipe out everybody within the network. If you're within the network, you're not going to be driven down to zero share. But in fact, you get supported if things get tough.
Any other questions or comments? This is easily one of the best attended sessions that's taken place in this room, by the way. Shows the people are very